Um, Colleagues, thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm Jamie Arrowsmith. I am Director of Universities UK International, and I'm delighted to welcome everyone for this sort of webinar. I think it's a sort of really sort of fantastic opportunity for what I hope is going to be a really kind of rich and rewarding and incredibly timely discussion. I think we all, I'm sure, recognise the immense contribution that international students make to the UK and to our universities and our communities. But also over the very long term, that's a contribution to our global networks and our connections as well. So it really is a profound privilege that we have to welcome and host so many international students. But that is also a responsibility, and it's a responsibility that we all share as a community to ensure that the students that choose the UK to pursue their dreams and their studies, that they are properly supported to get the very best out of their experience. And it's a responsibility to ensure that the students are equipped to succeed as well. I think it's reassuring that the vast majority of international students who come to study in the UK report that they have an excellent experience. Our universities and the wider higher education sector are rightly, I think, and proudly recognised for our quality and for our breadth of support that we provide. And we also know that our own students here in the UK, that they benefit hugely from the value and culture and diversity that bringing different perspectives to our campuses holds, and the kind of the contribution that makes to classrooms and labs and communities across the country. But although we start from a real position of strength, I think there are always things that we can do to get better and things that we absolutely need to try to focus on and to improve. And I think today's webinar really is an opportunity to think about the ways in which we can learn from the experience of students and from providers about how we can maximise the experience that international students get from the UK. And for example, how do we ensure that students that do choose to study here, they're not just able to engage with and understand their programme of study, but they're able to fully embrace their experience here in the UK. And I think it's a responsibility that we all share. It's about experience, and when we're talking about English language training and testing, it's about experience. It's not just about compliance. Now, early this year, the government published its new international education strategy, and the message in that has been clear. Quality is the driver, and it's the quality of the experience that we provide for international students is central to our offer. And that includes how we best prepare students to ensure that they are equipped to succeed. Now, the new strategy sets a clear expectation of delivery from the sector as well. In fact, the ESEC used to be called an advisory group, now it's an action group. And so we at UUK, we've been tasked with developing the university's action plan within 100 days. So watch this space for more information about that at some point. But I think we've got a fantastic opportunity today to think about English language preparation and testing and how that supports and contributes towards the confidence and ability of students to succeed. And as we say, to fully embrace their experience here in the UK. And I think that is absolutely a critical point and one that we would all share. And I think it's an opportunity for us to think critically about the areas where we can do more as a sector, how we learn from best practice, how we learn from what students are telling us, and how we learn from the experience of universities as well. That we can do it so that we do everything to ensure that domestic and international students are getting the very best out of the contribution that is being made by international students. So I want to thank you all for joining us today, and I look forward to a fantastic and enlightening discussion. And I'll now hand over to Angel. So Angel, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jamie. I hope people can hear me okay. Please drop us a line if you can't. That makes no sense. But thanks, Jamie. And thanks to everyone who's joined us today, especially for joining us over lunchtime. I'm Angel Gurria Quintana. I'm Director of Stakeholder Relations at Cambridge University Press and Assessment. We are part of the University of Cambridge and leaders in academic publishing, in education and assessment, reaching 100 million learners every year. And so I'm very grateful to UUK International for giving us a space and the time to have today's important conversation, timely conversation. More than welcome, unlocking the full value of international student communities. Jamie has framed our discussion very, very well. Before moving on, I'll just make some quick housekeeping notes. The webinar is being recorded and the recording will be shared with those who registered. We have about 50 minutes for this conversation, and I would invite you all to start putting any questions into the Q&A box on the platform as we go along. You don't have to wait until we're having the Q&As. Please feel free to drop your questions as soon as they come to mind. So to set the scene, at the end of last year, we at Cambridge commissioned some market research from the communications consultancy, Fleischmann Hillard. What we wanted to know we wanted to know more about the experience of international students coming to the UK, to UK universities. We wanted to know about perceptions of those international students. We wanted to know how domestic students feel about their international peers. We wanted to know what elements enhanced the international student experience, and were there things that made that experience more challenging? We are at Cambridge, we deliver language assessment globally, and so we were interested in the role of language skills in that student experience. And so we are going to hear about the findings of that survey shortly. No spoiler alerts from me just yet. It's a fairly comprehensive piece of research, which we will be publishing in full later this year. But today we'll be looking at some of the headlines. And they tell a hugely positive story. Crucially, we'll be asking our panelists to reflect on some of those findings. And so without further delay, let me introduce our panelists. We have with us Hannah Jones, who's Director of English Language Education at the University of Edinburgh. In that role, Hannah has oversight for all English for academic purposes provision, including international pathway programs and in-sessional support for all these international students. Hannah has previously worked at the University of Bristol and was head of English for academic purposes at a Chinese university. She's also chair of BALIP, the British Association of Lecturers in English for Academic Purposes, leading this organization in its mission to support the professional development of all those involved in learning, teaching, and research in English for academic purposes. So alongside her leadership roles, Hannah continues to teach. So welcome, Hannah. It's very good to have you here. Also joining us today is Bobby Mehta. Bobby is Pro-Vice Chancellor for Global Engagement at the University of Portsmouth. In that role, he leads the university's global operations and helps shape and deliver the university's global engagement strategy. He currently oversees a strategic transnational education partnerships office at Portsmouth, which, as its name suggests, is responsible for expanding high-quality educational opportunities through partnerships across the globe. So his expertise spans T&E, but also international admissions, marketing, strategic partnerships, student recruitment, business development, civic engagement. He's had advisory roles with organizations including UUK International, British Council, IDP, Universities Wales. And I should mention that Bobby is doing some outstanding work raising funds for 5 charities that support health, education, community building, heritage. So perhaps we'll be able to come back to that with Bobby wearing his sort of civic hat a bit later. So it's great to have you, Bobby. Welcome. Our third panelist is Ben Levine. Ben is Director and Senior Partner at True Global Intelligence. This is the Research and Analytics Division of Fleischmann Hillard, where he's worked with companies like Samsung, Bayer, and Philips, turning data into actionable intelligence. Before joining Fleischmann, Ben was president of the global analytics firm Ketchum, working again with some global clients like MasterCard and Pfizer. He's an alum of the University of New Hampshire, who then went on to study print journalism at Boston University. And it was Ben who led the research we'll be talking about. And so to kick us off today, I'd like to ask Ben to talk us through some of those key findings. And so Ben, over to you.
Great. Thank you, Angel, and thank you all for having me here today. Very honored and happy to be here and to talk through, as Angel said, give some of the headlines of the research that we conducted last year. So as we laid out, we were looking to understand what was the experience of students from an international perspective, domestic perspective, and within that experience, try to unpack and see how what role language proficiency played in that area, and try to glean insights that would help inform and ensure that we had a view on how to enrich that university experience. So just want to take a brief moment to kind of highlight the methodology that we undertook. So we conducted a survey of those international students, 2,000 across the United Kingdom, trying to get as robust and representative a perspective across different universities within the UK. And within that sample, we targeted, as I said, about 500 international students within that, and the rest being domestic. In addition to that, because we wanted to get that full kind of view on the areas of exploration, we also conducted a series of in-depth interviews with both administrative staff across the UK, as well as lecturers, teachers, and others, and used the combined data collection from both those methods to unpack and understand the research questions that we had set out for ourselves, and use those to come up with the headline insights that we're going to share in just a moment. So for both of those pieces of research, we had these kind of structure and plan for that. So on the student side, we very much started with that kind of overall experience at university. So how what is life like day to day? Also, what is it, that feeling within the classroom? And then we had a series of questions that were specific for those different student groups that we just mentioned. So homing in on the domestic students and trying to understand what is it like, what is their perceptions of engaging with their international peers in university. And then for those international students, really trying to understand their experience with the language test and assessment. What are the academic experiences like, and get a general sense of how they feel within university life. And then for more on the professional side or the academic side, and talking to those administrative admissions folks as well as lecturers, getting their perceptions on what is life like for those students, what role does language play, and what is just their overall perspective about what universities should be, are doing throughout that process, and what improvements can be made, and what lessons can we take forward. And we took this approach to really try to get that breadth on the student side, and get those perspectives, and then get that qual to really try to unpack that a bit more, add additional context to what we saw within the data. So in terms of what we found, and this has been alluded to already in the setup, but what we found in our research is that from an international student perspective, studying the UK is rated as an excellent experience. So more than half rated the overall experience on university as excellent. So thinking about probably that day-to-day campus life, the friends they've made, what is that like? So very, very high levels of positivity there. And this also carried over into the classroom and lecture experience, which I think speaks to the point that was raised right at the top about just the reputation that universities have within the UK and why it is a desirable destinations for students from around the world to come and study here. So that is a very positive place to start and very heartening to see within the data that we collected. And in addition to that, what we also found was that in exploring with domestic students, kind of what were the benefits that they gained from their international peers, is that there was a strong belief that international students improved the overall university experience for everyone, that they provide and have gained academic benefits and valuable new insights and perspectives. So really enriching that experience, what they have in the classroom as well as on campus. And when we look at some of the bit deeper at some of the other kind of elements of that in terms of what does positivity look like there, we saw that domestic students were clear on those benefits that international students brought to university. So, one of the kind of like strongest stats there that we saw was that 2 and 3 said it wouldn't feel the same without them. But across the board, when we look at kind of the net positivity on everything from international students being part of the wider community to developing close friendships, there is, quite an enriched experience that was coming through within the data when we are talking to those domestic students in terms of how they feel and what they felt that their international peers brought to life. But of course, as we said, there is part of that experience that is worth noting, and I think a big part of what we'll talk about today, that there were a not insignificant number of international students who did say that participation in university life can be impacted by language ability as well as within confidence in communicating. So we found that 1 in 4 said it had been difficult to take part in student life at their university due to their language skills, and that 1 in 3 have found that part of that also translated, that difficultness translated to participation in group work or within the classroom. And so what we also found in doing that quality review is that it's both a part of perhaps proficiency or language, but equally it can be down to confidence. It can be down to culture and different learning styles that are perhaps holding them back from engaging as strongly or as forcefully as they might otherwise have done. So it's this balance between their abilities when it comes to language, but also the confidence that they might have and being self-conscious about how they might come off in a classroom setting. And so when we took the data together and then thought about, well, what does this mean going forward? In terms of improving the learning experience for international students, there are a couple things that came through, which is how can we support lecturers, teachers, university staff to really be attuned to cultural differences, be it particularly when it relates to teaching and learning styles, and enable them and equip them to support those students to get the most out of the experience and help them overcome those barriers. And to think through some of the practical adaptations to coursework that could be implemented based on that feedback. And you can see there on the screen some of the verbatim feedback that we got on that particular issue and some of the steps that teachers in the classroom are already making in terms of setting expectations up front, encouraging students to communicate in a language that's comfortable and being mindful of that, and then taking them on a journey to help them, and also thinking about adaptation of style. So all taken together, very positive results from the data about the impact and the richness that having an international student community brings to university life, as well as, I think very practical insights that we can all take and learn from. So overall, a very positive experience. And thank you very much for listening to me today.
Many thanks, Ben. And I might come back to you a little bit later with some questions, but that's really helpful. And I think a really good way to start a conversation about how everyone involved in the education of international students can contribute to improving that educational journey. I guess if I may start by turning to Hannah and asking you, Hannah, whether the findings Ben was describing resonate. What was your initial reaction to this?
So I thank you for the question, and it's a really interesting piece of research. It's kind of I can't pinpoint one initial reaction because I have lots of different reactions, I think it's fair to say. I think it's really, really positive to see how much so-called home students do sort of appreciate the enrichment to their experience that is brought by the sort of diversity of perspectives that are brought into classrooms by international students. I think that's really positive. But it's also the case in that survey, what I was struck by is there is a third of them that don't think that. So I think it's important to think about this issue not only in terms of that, really take it as a call to action, as was said, and think about what we can do to address that participation gap. One of my key reactions to the research was thinking about, do we know that the participation gap is sort of rooted in language? And what do we mean by language? I feel confident that students are coming into university with a core sort of baseline of language proficiency that is appropriate. But there's a difference between that baseline language proficiency and the ability to engage in a diversity of academic practices that are privileged or expected in UK higher education. And the participation gap, as we saw in the research, often comes up in relation to seminar and discussion participation. And I think that is about confidence. Certainly students tell me it's about confidence, but I think it's more than confidence. I think it is also related to different understanding of what it means to participate. There's a lot of discussion in education and in my field around legitimate silent participation and listening as a form of participation. And I think we really need to value not only international students' perspectives when they do bring their perspectives into the discussion, but their different ways of participating, and have a conversation about that, which makes sure that international students are supported to participate, and that we do what we can in terms of setting expectations and participating and supporting with strategies, but also thinking about this not only as a one-way street where international students need to learn how to sort of adjust themselves to the communities that they're joining, but where the academic communities in the UK as well think about how we can adjust. Ultimately, we have to teach the students we have, right? As a teacher, we can't teach the students that we wish we had, or the students we had 30 years ago. So if you've got students in a classroom that have a different way of participating or a different way of learning, there's a responsibility then to think about what that means for you and what you might do differently. So I think that was a bit of a rambling response, but to recap, I think that there is a conversation here about how we teach as well as how we support our students.
Mm. So someone has put in the chat, what do you mean, Hannah, by participation? So I guess that means a number of things, but how do you define it?
That's exactly what I'm saying. I saw that in the chat, and that's I think that was Sally. That's exactly what I'm saying, Sally. That in certain cultures, participation can be silent, can mean listening. So participation means different things to different people, and I think that we could have more conversations about that in UK higher education, about value in different forms of participation.
Thank you, Hannah. I'd like to come back to a point you were making, but let me just ask Bobby for his initial reaction to what Ben was talking about earlier.
Yeah, so thanks, Frank, and thank you for having me on the panel. I think my initial reactions and the reflections on the research are really positive. I think it's very, very timely, the work that Cambridge have done here. And it highlights what I personally have understood for a long time. The international students value UK higher education. They see the quality of UK higher education. And I think that is a very timely reminder of the importance of UK higher education. I think in the very recent months and years, that's starting to get lost a little bit. What are we here for? There's a lot of focus on compliance and issues, etc. But actually, UK higher education is something that is of value, and the quality of it is also of value. And I think also international students, and the survey shows that international students are being seen in many ways as a negative, as a statistic, as an immigration issue, whereas you can see from the reaction of the domestic students that they actually add value. And this is peer-to-peer feedback, where Cambridge has shown that UK domestic students value having international students in the classroom and acknowledge significantly that they are adding value to that domestic experience. So that's my first reflection. My second reflection was the challenges that international students face once they're here on campus, and those are real challenges and things that we do need to look at. And I think, again, it's a timely reminder, because we focus a lot of our discussions in the recent past on compliance, on how do we do these things, amber, green, red, all those issues. But we've got international students here. We will, I believe, continue to attract international students to our campuses, and the support and education we give them is also really important. So actually, this research, again, I think that comes at a good time, and it's almost an opportunity for us to take stock and to look at those experiences that they're having, and where they are finding it difficult to fit in on campus, to settle, to integrate, to be part of both the university community and the wider community. I think there's a real opportunity for us collectively to share best practices, and I think that's part of what this webinar here today will do as we explore further. So yeah, those are my initial reflections.
Thanks. Bobby, you, because of your role, you also have a very specific angle on the question of participation, that sort of wearing kind of your hat as the leader enabling civic participation. Is that something that you feel universities are well equipped to do, to enable students to join in those civic activities?
Yeah, so from what I've seen, and if I look at what we've done here at University of Portsmouth and other universities that I know, the civic agenda is very, very important to all UK universities. But I think we can do more. I think we can do more, particularly around this particular agenda of international students. I think we can create an environment where our international students are part of our civic engagement and are doing outreach. So if I just give you a couple of examples, I've seen really good practice where international students who come and study on UK campuses are then engaged with local schools, where they go into local schools, they share their backgrounds, the countries they come from, their experiences, their language, their food. We have at the University of Portsmouth, we have a month where we celebrate different cultures, a global festival as part of that month, and we invite schools and local groups in to meet with our students to experience different food, different cultures, language, etc., etc. So I think there's a big opportunity on that front, and there's benefits for everybody. We've had schemes where I've seen student ambassadors going into local homes for the elderly and engaging with the elderly there, learning about those experiences, their history, their upbringings, and also sharing theirs, you know. So you can create some really long life relationships, bonds, and engagement at a really different level, where students feel they're part not just of the university community, but that wider community in your locality.
And Hannah, Bobby's talking about sort of engagement outside of the classroom, but you teach, so you're at the coalface of dealing with these international students, and so where in your experience does that participation break down, and what can be done about it?
So we probably shouldn't overstate how much I actually am at the chalk face teaching these days. Just to be clear, I don't want to claim a space that I actually don't occupy anymore as much as perhaps I would like to. But I do have oversight of teaching provision, and I love these initiatives in Portsmouth. I just want to say first, Bobby, I think that anything that we can do to help international students feel part of a wider community, feel a sense of belonging, a sense of mattering, and where there are opportunities for students themselves to have their voices heard in what that looks like and to co-create that. I think that's very valuable as well. Touches a little bit on what I was trying to articulate earlier around making sure that what we do is not a one-way street of we've got these things to make you international students learn how to fit in, but actually finding a way to work together and hear from them and what do they think would help them. I think that's really important. But to more directly respond to your question, Angel, I think it's why does participation break down? I think I tried to answer in my previous response. So I do think that it's a kind of a clustered and complex intersection of language, of culture, of academic practice, of the different practices of different discourse communities as well. What participation looks like in a seminar in a law school, for example, is different to what successful participation might look like in an engineering lab. And so it's really difficult, if not impossible, to be fully prepared for all of those different scenarios. So I do really think that universities have a duty of care responsibility to make sure that there is integrated support for all students, not only international students, to help students see and understand and potentially have an opportunity to challenge even what expectations are in the actual communities that they are joining, the subject area communities that they're part of. I don't think we really know exactly why communication breaks down. I think if we knew that, we would probably do a better job of addressing the issue. But I do think it's that intersection of confidence, culture, and practices, teaching practices as well, as I mentioned before. And to help with that, I do think that English for academic purposes is a critical and vital strategic partner for the academic disciplines and the wider university in promoting student success and belonging. It is through language that we access subject area knowledge. It is through language that we then communicate that knowledge, co-construct that knowledge with others. And I feel that perhaps too often that centrality of language is tacit or assumed or not sort of sufficiently surfaced and visible, both for student and staff communities. So in my institution, we and many others in the UK, we are moving towards a more embedded approach to English for academic purposes, where support is integrated into degree programme learning. And this is really important because if English for academic purposes support is not integrated, it's then peripheral, it's then remedial. If it's outside the timetable, if it's somewhere where students are perhaps sent to have their problems fixed, even though that can be really well intentioned and very much designed in service of student success, actually that conceptualization of support can be incredibly exclusionary. It puts an additional burden on students in terms of workload outside the timetable. It positions them as in deficit. So I'm a big advocate for integrating that support into core learning for all students, not only for international students. Academic English is nobody's mother tongue, as I like to say. Doesn't come from me, comes from Bourdieu many years ago, but it's a powerful point that actually, does anyone really know when they enter university, unless they have a sort of very specific profile, exactly what's expected of them? So my thoughts on that are very much around integrating support into the curriculum, making language visible in the curriculum, so that students don't have to go and search for the support or be sent away to get the support.
But that really involves a redesigning the curriculum and sort of reconceptualizing the entire student journey from the point of admission all the way through to graduation.
It does. Yeah, it does. And obviously that's, you know, that's a vision, and it has challenges, not least resourcing, particularly in the context that the sector is in at the moment. But as I said, I do think there's a duty of care responsibility to do that redesign work, to think about how we teach, how we design our learning activities in a way that are truly inclusive to all the communities that we want to serve as educators.
Bobby, do you have any thoughts on what Hannah was just saying, and in particular about sort of the role of language and how to make it more explicit, more visible, and something that, you know, sort of lack of skills is not carried around as a stigma. It's something that requires proactive support from institutions.
Yeah, look, what Hannah's just shared, I think, is really the way things should go, and is definitely a vision of what good looks like. So yeah, I really do support that type of approach. But as we acknowledge, it's difficult. Lots going on across the university sector, in universities, in university corridors. So it's difficult. But what we've got to try and do is break it down. That there are ways of still being mindful of everything that's been shown in this research, and sometimes doing small things. So look, right now across the sector, we know that students coming in our recent January intakes or September intakes coming from certain parts of the world are going to face visa delays. So that's already putting students potentially at a disadvantage. We know as university practitioners that induction programs are put in place for good reason, and those induction programs are really, really important. Okay, so if we know that, a lot of international students potentially in September, we know are potentially going to arrive late, and we know when international students are first arrived, that culture shock, that learning everything, etc., etc., is difficult as it is. Sometimes they're on master's programs or shorter programs, which means that they've got no time to really spend, getting used to the environment, etc. So if we know all of that now, right now, our teams working together, both academic and professional service teams, can be working together to create that plan B solution. So we know students are possibly going to arrive late. How are we going to support those students? What are we going to do at the beginning of so without having to change anything in the mainstream programs, what support is going to be put around them? What supports can the Students' Union put in? We've got all these great societies, etc. The peer-to-peer engagement, we shouldn't underestimate how important that is. Previous students from those countries engaging with new students coming in, all of those types of things. And it doesn't stop there. You can then go further than that. You've got community groups. You will have within the cities, towns, places that you have people from the Bangladeshi community, from the Indian community, from the Sri Lankan community, from the Chinese community. Again, how can you utilize these support groups, community groups, to support international students when they're coming? And all of that is not difficult to do. It's probably relationships that universities across the UK already have in place. They have the societies. It's just engaging them and saying, look, this is something that's likely to happen. We know it happens. It happens every year, but right now in the current environment that we're working in, it's going to be a little bit more difficult for international students. They may not be as welcome in certain parts of the UK as they previously were. They may be coming in, as I've seen in the last 12 months. We've had the internationals coming in. There's protests going on in London at the same time. So what are we going to do in our community, in our local environment, to really support them, to make them feel welcome, and to make sure that that doesn't cause another negative impact that then impacts them on the classroom? Because as we've already said, international students will come with lots of different things, but confidence, because this is the first time they've come to the UK. This is the first time they've been in a UK education environment. As Hannah highlighted earlier, it is a different language, and often the students are coming from different education systems, different learning styles, often rote learning where they are told what it is rather than think for yourself, explore, make the most of the environment around them. So I think just by thinking about these things collectively in preparation for international students in their arrival, and starting to think slightly outside the box, and putting on extra induction programs, extra welcome programs, recording, putting some of those resources online, so while they're waiting for the outcomes of their visas, they can see and engage with those content. Creating that virtual community where international students can talk to a student here. So, at the University of Portsmouth, we do a campaign as part of our conversion activities where our students are talking to prospective students. So our current students are talking to prospective students. So in that, they can talk about, I'm having this difficulty, where do I find out about this? Blah, blah. So as in that preparation to come to be in the UK, to be on campus, they can get a little bit ahead of the game. So these small things can help.
So there's a question in the chat about that, which I was going to ask both of you. But on this subject of confidence, Ala Ross has asked, what can we do during the pre-arrival period to boost international students' confidence? So this is Ala from Edinburgh.
Yeah, so I'll just continue. So one of the things on the confidence point is engaging with current students from their countries who are studying here. That definitely helps to deal with those early questions. Them knowing when they come to the UK, when they come to the university, that there's a home from home. That there are people locally. There's restaurants. Food is food. Food is very important. So to know that locally you can get the food, all of those types of things. So you're taking out the barriers which therefore increases the student's confidence, and they can focus more on what they're here to do, which is the learning, the education, getting the degrees. But I'll bring in Hannah maybe.
I think, and thanks for the question, Ala. I think a lot of what can be done is exactly what Bobby was talking about, and I do think that the peer learning schemes. I know we have this in Edinburgh as well with our Students' Association. We have a sort of peer-to-peer learning scheme, and I think if those can be operationalised pre-arrival, that can be really powerful. Sometimes institutions are able to actually offer transitions courses for students that begin before their main programs. I always feel that this can be really, really powerful, but I don't think it's a substitute for support that is ongoing throughout the journey, because if you front load everything, then actually you're not necessarily as a student going to remember everything that you were. It's one of the perennial issues with induction and I think it applies to pre-arrival support as well, that actually support is most impactful if you get it at exactly the moment you need it. So once you've actually got your assignment questions, once you've actually been in your lectures or your tutorials and you can see what's difficult, that's when the support's going to be most meaningful. Whereas if you front load all of it, it's a very overwhelming time for a student as well. They're getting information about everything all at the same time. So I think pre-arrival, induction, all of those things are really, really valuable, but they're not a substitute for what you can weave in throughout the student journey. Having said that, I do think transitions provision can be really valuable. And I noticed Ala is from the School of Engineering in my institution, and actually we do have a partnership with the School of Engineering where we do a transitions course for undergraduate students on some of our 2+2 programs, where they come to Edinburgh for a few weeks before they actually start. So it's not really pre-arrival, but it is pre-degree study. And it's delivered with some engineering content and some EAP content. I think that can be really, well, we know that those types of transitions and pathway provision do improve student engagement and experience, sense of belonging, and sometimes outcomes as well. Sometimes those types of provisions can be online so that they are truly pre-arrival. They're things that students can engage with, perhaps flexibly before they start their studies. So I think if there's funding for that type of activity, that can be really valuable as well.
And I'd like to ask whether you think language assessment has a role in that at that early point of admissions, or even throughout a student's education.
100%. Yeah, it definitely does. So some participants on the call may be aware of the Good Practice Guide that was recently jointly published by BALIP, my organisation, and BWILA, the British Universities International Liaison Association. And the research that went into that guide is very much evidences the English language as a journey. That begins at the point of a student accessing a test, and then goes all the way through till graduation. And that assessment is really, really important. Some of the students that we talked to when we were developing that publication talked about the positive impact of their testing experience on their English language development. In testing speak, we call this washback. It's not a very nice term, but it means the impact of the test on the learning. So a good test should lead to learning behaviours which truly promote language development as well. And particular student that I'm thinking of, who was in one of our focus groups, talked about how their preparation for the exam that they were taking really helped them actually understand some of the conventions around academic essay writing. And that's why I think that testing needs to be, as far as is possible, it can never be completely authentic, because it's not practical to test students in exactly the same way as they would be assessed at university, because you can't get them to write a 2,000-word essay with multiple sources, for example, but it should be as authentic a proxy as possible. So that testing is really important in actually truly as authentically as possible assessing the skills that students will need for higher education study. And then in a really I guess in a really blunt way, like we do need to be sure that the test measures what we think it's measured, because despite everything I said earlier about students come in with a baseline proficiency, which isn't the same as being able to engage in academic subject areas, all of that is true, but not to the extent that language proficiency doesn't matter. We do need to be really sure that a test will make sure that students do come in with that baseline. And the Good Practice Guide has a lot of practical tools for how departments and universities can evaluate the range of tests on the market to make sure that they're truly robust and meet their needs. Yeah, I can pop a link in the chat to that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, so just reflecting on what Hannah's just been talking about, and actually it was a conversation that Hannah and I had the last time we were together in person. It's also, I think testing is really important, and like Hannah's highlighted, it helps the students in so many different ways. But I think it's also really, really important in all of this, all the conversation we've had, but particularly around testing, that we think about our staff as well. Both professional service staff and academic staff. And for staff to have a real understanding of what a test result means in reality. So, Hannah, you remember the conversation we were talking about, what does an IELTS 6.5 or 6 or 7 actually translate to in terms of actual language ability in the classroom? And actually getting our colleagues to understand that, to become aware of that, and then to be able to be prepared to deal with that when they are in the classroom environment, because it is different. It is different. And to understand the language abilities of students coming from different parts of the world, where they may not be as confident with speaking, they may not be as confident with writing, and how do you mix all of these different things together? It's a big, big challenge for academic colleagues, not only to be dealing with the domestic students, but then to be taking international students with all their different backgrounds and needs. So what training can we put in place? What support can we put in place to our staff? And, the university community, the sector has to really take that into account as well. And what can we do to take our academic colleagues and professional service colleagues on that journey? Because you can't underestimate and again, what does a TOEFL result over here or other English language tests, what do they mean and what do they look like when the students arrive? I think that's another really, really important part. I know Barleap have done a lot of work on this as well.
So better assessment literacy.
100%. I think that is really, really important. I think it's as Bobby was saying, I don't think everybody really knows what an IELTS 6.5 is, and what an IELTS 6.5 may be a completely appropriate minimum standard to start a degree program, but it also might indicate that somebody's going to need some help with some stuff. I remember talking to somebody about this recently, and they gave a really good example that I thought I'd share, that when you start a job, right, like you've done your job interview and you start your job, nobody thinks that as a new start in your job you're not going to need induction and support and further training. But I do think that, and I'm probably overstating this for sort of rhetorical purposes, but I think that sometimes we imagine that an international student is going to come in with an IELTS 6.5 and they should need nothing. And if they need anything, it means there's something wrong and we've lowered standards and etc. It doesn't mean that at all. We wouldn't say that about a new start in a role with a job interview. And I just thought that was quite a nice analogy for a wide audience as well.
Yeah, and I also think that, I think there's a question, a comment in the chat around the different tests, and I personally am quite for the development of technology and artificial intelligence and how that can support language testing as we go forward. I think that is definitely the world we're in, and that's what even students would love to engage with and have. But we've got to do all of those things and embrace it and move forward with those things, because it's also about accessibility. That's another thing in making testing accessible. So I think the role of technology, the role of AI, and how testing providers continue to push the boundaries and utilize technologies. And we've got to do it properly. We've got to do it so it gives us the right understanding of the students' abilities and levels, etc. But I really, in terms of as things move forward, want to see how language testing evolves with the use of technology.
We are coming to the end of our session. It's flown by. Before we wrap things up, I'd like to bring Ben in again if he's there. So we have all of us on screen. And Ben, what I wanted to ask you is, you do this kind of thing with companies and organizations, and so these surveys are your bread and butter. But I wanted to ask you whether there was anything that was surprising, or anything you learned that you thought was noteworthy from doing this particular piece of research with students and universities about perceptions.
Yeah. So I think there's a couple of things that stood out for me, and it's you can find this a lot within research. So it was the positivity that came through in terms of I wasn't expecting it to be as high as it was. And I think part of that is because I think what happens is you'll see a public discourse, you'll see media coverage, when you're trying to get under the skin of a topic, you do that research to try to understand it as much as you can. And what I was seeing in that research kind of painted at times a different story than I was expecting. So I thought that was really interesting and also quite heartening too. And it just goes to show that, what gets attention versus what people feel at an individual level and maybe experience. There's a disconnect between those two things. And the other element, and both Bobby and Hannah have kind of been touching on this in the discussion today, which is incredibly interesting and enlightening and educational for myself, is I guess the complexity of what admission staff, lecturers are all kind of grappling with on these topics, both in terms of when you think about students coming to the UK, the process of assessment, to the realities of teaching in a classroom. So that was maybe not surprising isn't the right word, but until you get into it, it's just your eyes are kind of like open to just the complexity, the breadth of it, and what all these everyone is grappling with and having to manage day to day.
Thank you very much. We have literally 1 minute left, and so I am going to put Hannah and Bobby on the spot and ask if there was one practical recommendation you would make to enhance international student participation. If there was that one takeaway from this seminar, this webinar, what would it be?
Want me to go first?
Sure.
Yeah, so one practical suggestion. So it's going to be kind of similar to what I said, but it's collaboration. So I think that English for academic purposes practitioners can and want to collaborate with other teams, admissions teams, recruitment teams, and colleagues in academic schools to develop initiatives and learning that support students.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Bobby?
I'll pick on civic engagement. I'd say look at how you can get your international students more involved with the civic agenda, get them embedded not only within the university communities, but your wider community, both around the immediate university or in your towns and cities. That will help to create, I think, an even greater experience for your international students, both when they are here with us in the UK and studying on campus, but when they leave as well, they'll leave with long-lasting memories and friendships.
Well, thank you both very much. Thank all three of you very much. So I'm afraid we've come to the end. I've been asked to just remind people next week, of course, is the International Higher Education Forum happening in London. We, Cambridge, will be hosting a panel discussion on a very similar topic. So this is really a rich topic which we could talk about from many, many angles. So if any of you are going to be around at IHEF next week, please come and join us. And details are on the screen right now. And so I'll just finish by saying many, many thanks to our panelists, Ben, Hannah, Bobby. Many, many thanks to the UUKI events team, and many thanks to the people who've been listening and watching and sending in their comments. I'm sorry we didn't get round to all the questions, but thank you all very much for joining us over lunch.